Thanks for tuning in to OTR. Sean McBrearty is here, helping to lead a statewide petition drive to block the state's two major utilities from making political contributions. What's going on there? Our lead story, an update on efforts to fix the roads, and what does Dana Nessel want? Around the OTR table this week, Simon Shuster, Lauren Gibbons, and Rick Pluta sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Studio C on this Pure Michigan Friday morning, Off the Record. Kind of a weird news week. I mean, nothing really jumped out at me. How about you guys?
It's summer.
Yeah, it's summer. Is that what it is? Okay.
Well, hot, lazy days,
let's
right?
chalk it up to that. Let's talk about Mike Duggan, all right? Since he wants to, what does he want to do for the pay?
So the legislature stalled on the statutory deadline for adopting a state budget. It's July 1st, but there are no consequences for the people who are supposed to get that done for blowing through that deadline.
Why would they put in a something to punish themselves?
And so, but Mike Duggan, kind of taking advantage of the situation, and I also think, plugging into what's supposed to be his strong suit and his message of quiet competence, says, look, if these guys don't meet that deadline, you can't not pay them. There would be issues there because that's set in state law. But you could say we're going to hold on to your paychecks until you get it done. And he rolled that proposal out, just not too long before we're taping this show.
Yeah, and this is the beauty of an independent run for governor, and also sort of the narrowness with the needle he has to thread, is that you have to attack the status quo, which is not necessarily hitting solely Democrats or Republicans, but sort of the current state of affairs. And so he can look at this sort of bipartisan dysfunction and say, I want to do something that will punish both sides equally if they don't get along with, making government function smoothly.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it could potentially gain traction. I think where it would really start to matter and where people might start to be on is if they look like they're going to miss the constitutional deadline. Like this July 1st deadline, obviously it matters quite a bit to schools, to local governments, to all of the entities receiving state money that already had to start putting their budgets together. But in terms of, the government shutdown, that hasn't come yet. So the urgency isn't quite there yet, I don't think.
Let me throw some water.
The same urgency.
It's certainly still important. But
schools are out there banging the drum trying to get people to pay attention. But yeah, because, we have had government shutdowns or partial government shutdowns in the past, and that's where you've got, the drama of what's actually happening and not happening on the floor of the legislature.
Time out. Who would have to pass this in order for this to take effect?
Oh, we see where you're going.
I rest my case. Okay, this has two chances, slim and none.
But that doesn't.
And Slim just left.
But that doesn't mean that someone can introduce a bill and then start being like, here it is. You could put it up for a vote anytime, which again gives Mike Duggan that campaigning opportunity. And let's not forget, there is at least one sitting legislator in the crowd of candidates who are running for governor who, maybe would also face pressure to do something and make a similar display of commitment to competence.
Look, this is low-hanging fruit for him. Okay, what I'm surprised at is that he hasn't been commenting all the way along here. There's plenty of fodder in this whole bailiwick, is there not?
Sure, but again, this is the difficulty of running an independent campaign, is that at this early stage...
It doesn't cost anything to issue a press release?
No.
And it didn't.
But you also have to be able to show that you're running not as a Democrat or as a Republican, but that you sort of want to deal out this blame equally. If you're solely knocking one party or the other, then you risk the possibility of going into the general election with people saying, oh, he's just a Democrat in disguise. Or
that's what they're going to say anyway. That's the mantra that the R's are going to trot out on him.
I mean, we've got a Senate controlled by Democrats, a House controlled by Republicans, and a Democratic governor. That I mean, you can't really say that. No one could credibly say that, at least on this issue in particular, that he's pulling punches on the D side.
Yeah, and to your point, certainly it would be a very, very tough slog through the legislature, very unlikely to pass or get super traction from either party. But that's, sort of the strategy, I think. To Simon's point, it's definitely one of those things that sounds good, and it sounds like I'm coming in, I want a budget to get done. And so there may be some, some...
And also to Simon's point, I mean, you're just the star of the show, Simon, I mean, there are already people asking, where has the governor been in all of this? And if Mike Duggan starts, banging that drum as well, then that also speaks to whether or not he's going to pull his punches on Democrats.
How about Mr. Duggan saying, if he really believes in this, how about a petition drive?
He'd have a lot of petition drives.
Yeah, but I think it also speaks to his.
Everyone could be
record.
standing in the same corner.
I'm sorry.
When you look at his tenure, I think this also speaks to Mike Duggan's political record. When you look at his tenure as the mayor of Detroit, we've seen a concentration of power in the office of the mayor, and his ability to sort of get the city council sort of rest them and bring them in the direction that he wants them to go in terms of the development of the city. And so I think part of this is also him expressing, if you elect me for governor, I'm going to have the legislature under my thumb, and I'm going to make sure that they function smoothly, whether or not they want to.
All right, quick answer. Dana Nessel, is she running for something, yay or nay?
No.
No.
I'm not seeing evidence of it.
All right, let's see if she is or not. Look at this piece. Democratic State Attorney General Dana Nessel has joined with other Democratic AGs around the country to fight President Donald Trump at almost every turn. She continues on her legal battle to kill the Pipeline 5 project under the Straits of Mackinac. She wants to convict a former House Speaker of wrongdoing, and she's charging the MEDC with stonewalling her probe into alleged misuse of state job investment spending. In other words, she's very, very busy.
So a lot of people are suspicious that this looks like a candidate in waiting, a candidate priming herself to run for something.
But Mr. Ballinger and countless others don't have any proof at any level that she's running for anything, any higher office. She could run for governor. 3 other Democrats are already in the hunt. Or she could run for Gary Peters' U.S. Senate seat. 3 other Democrats are already running for that. Meanwhile, public relations executive and consultant John Trescott thinks the Senate bid is out, but running for governor may be in.
The Democratic field for governor is not that strong. She's waiting to let this play out a little bit, and then we'll jump in kind of as the savior of the Democratic Party and run for governor.
The AG's office says she has not made up her mind about her future, but the betting money is, well, depends on who you talk to. We're going to guess, is Dana Nessel running for something?
I would guess no, but anything is possible.
I'd be willing to write a big check that she's definitely running for office. You don't just do the types of things that she's doing without some future aspirations in mind.
The only person who knows for sure is the person you're looking at, and she's not talking. Get your big checkbook out. Are you within the Trescott camp? No.
Well, I don't make campaign donations, and my recommendation to you, Tim, is that you shouldn't either.
Should I be writing this stuff down? Is this a career saver, is what you're telling me?
Something, like that.
Is Trescott onto something?
Well, I think that, by sort of this analysis, we do risk sort of taking a pretty cynical outlook into what the role of the Attorney General should be, and the idea that, the criminal and civil investigations that they undertake should be circumscribed by, political opportunity. I think that if you look at sort of the chemistry, the dynamics of a Democratic primary, if we've learned anything from this party over the past 8 years, it's that they really are unwilling to eat their own. And if you look at this MEDC investigation, as it expands and becomes closer and closer to the governor's office, this is really something that has the opportunity to hurt Gretchen Whitmer's political capital and, potentially what the investigation shows her political future. And so as a result, I think that if we're going, if Dana Nessel is going to sort of be off the chain, so to speak, and full force going to this investigation, it's not something that would necessarily go well with the insularity that happens within these Democratic primaries.
And it's important to note that Attorney General Nessel has really positioned herself as the anti-Trump Democrat in the state since his second term started. We've seen Governor Whitmer try to work with Trump on several occasions. She obviously disagreed with him on some of the...
she will live to regret.
Potentially.
Which is what Ms. Nessel said.
and we have seen her disagree with him on some more recent stuff, like the big beautiful bill. But Attorney General Nessel has been there, taking a very similar strategy as his first term, challenging him at almost every opportunity. In this term, it's been challenging the funding cuts, challenging a lot of different aspects of the Trump administration's priorities. And so some people could read that as saying, hey, 2026, this might be a good opportunity for me, but she hasn't said anything, so I'll wait to see what she says.
If we're going to be, that cynical about it, then the play that Dana Nessel is making is to the Democrats' progressive base, which isn't necessarily a winner going into a general election. But you look at what I think you guys are right about her being the anti-Trump, and you look at what she's up to. She's working with other Democratic AGs across the country to file lawsuits against all kinds of Trump policies to try and stop in court what they can't seem to stop in Congress. And that seems to be, to me at least, to be the motivating factor in what she's up to right now.
Give her credit. She has kept this thing, whatever she's going to do, and maybe she hasn't decided, okay? Really close to the vets. Usually in this town, if you work the phones hard enough, you can find out what a potential candidate A is doing from a whole bunch of people. There ain't a whole bunch of...
I think that if there's any sort of if there's another counterpoint against her running for office, it's the lack of expediency with which some of these investigations have played out. In terms of the false electors, we're going on 2 years, none of these cases have moved to trial.
Rick Snyder.
Yes, the
Flint water.
Yeah, the fatal errors with the Flint water crisis prosecution, and then also, of course, lead Stephanie Chatfield. This is also something that's played out over a span of years rather than months, which really takes the window of political opportunity here and diminishes it significantly.
Yeah, and to the question that you asked, that you're kind of at the point in the cycle that you don't really want to be coy about what your ambitions are, is that you want your name out there, probably focused on a particular office, but certainly just a small number, to try and get a coalition coalescing around you.
Yeah, but if Mr. Trescott is right and the field for the Democratic nomination for governor disintegrates, she gets on her white horse and she rides in. So that's a possibility as well. I'm not saying that would happen.
That's a remote possibility.
All right, very quickly. On the road package, the word that we're picking up this week is there is a potential. They've not decided this, but the goal was $3 billion to fix the roads. They're now talking about changing the target. If we make it $2 billion, boys and girls, we could declare victory and go home. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that the Republicans have a major target in terms of funding sources here, which is a central piece of Governor Gretchen Whitmer's agenda, these key economic development accounts that she sort of places part of her legacy. If those get caught in the crossfire on a roads package, then it's politically pretty damaging for her.
I think a lot of people in the industry would say we'd be happy to see any long-term funding.
They'll take it.
They'll take it. But that said, if there's still this gap in funding that we're seeing from all of the studies, from all of the reports, there's still going to be some people complaining about the quality of their roads.
They come back after the election and raise the extra billion.
There you go.
Sure, maybe. Okay. Yeah, I would count on that, Tim. Go ahead. And also
I think they said that in 2015 as well.
Right. And are pot and vapes really a long-term funding solution that you want to rely on?
Rick, you don't understand. This is not about a long-term. This is getting over the hump and getting her out of office with a legacy signed, sealed, and delivered. What happens after me is their problem.
I still stand by the question.
Well, right, and I still stand by the answer. All right, let's call in the guy who's running a petition drive to go after DT Energy and Consumers Energy. How come? Let's find out. Welcome to Off the Record, a petition drive. Do you realize what you're getting into?
I think I do. Thanks so much for having me, Tim.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, our coalition has been working on this policy for quite a long time. For the last 2 legislatures, we've had bills introduced to do what we're working to do with this ballot initiative. And wherever we go across the state, talking to regular folks about this, we find across Michigan, in the last year, how many people have had a power outage at home? In the last year, how many people have had their power rates rise? When it comes to the government contractor side of the work that we're doing, how many people have had coverage denied by an insurance company that their doctor said was medically necessary? Far too many. There's things our state government can do about it. The reason those aren't getting done is because these companies are pouring millions of dollars into buying our government because it's cheaper than providing the services they're supposed to provide.
With all due respect, some might argue you have to have proof that something wrong has gone on here. You could have a political point of view. We don't agree what they're doing, but show me the proof that this system simply not working and is broken.
Well, since we've seen the corrosive influence of corporate money on our political system continue to grow, we've seen this increased polarization across the board. We've also seen, in the case, what we're working to do with this ballot initiative is not to ban all corporate money from politics. We're working to do what we can within the bounds of existing law, which is to stop those corporations that derive such a large percentage of their profits from their dealings with government. Groups like Consumers Energy and DTE, which Michigan residents right now are paying the highest bills in the Midwest for some of the most unreliable service. And the reason those companies aren't being held accountable is because in 2022, DTE, for instance, donated to 138 out of 148 state lawmakers. In 2023, it was 119 out of 148 state lawmakers.
So,
if I may interject, corporations can't legally give directly to candidates' campaigns. These are employee PACs that are made up of donations from the employees of the companies making voluntary contributions.
Yeah,
can you invalidate that without running
and
afoul of the First Amendment?
Those, but he's not wrong about the point, at least as a legality.
Yeah, absolutely. These are dark money entities, and part of the problem we're dealing with here is that what they're doing is totally legal. In order to break the law, they'd pretty much have to walk up to a lawmaker with a bag of cash and say, this is in exchange for your vote on X bill. The people of Michigan are smart enough to see through the facts and to see that, like, for instance, last term, when residents in Detroit were without power for weeks during a winter storm, DTE's PAC, or DTE's C4 rather, donating $100,000 to Speaker Joe Tate's C4 somehow made the utility accountability bills go away.
I guess I'm curious, why take the dark money route as opposed to proposing a ballot initiative that would tackle some of the policies or some of the concerns that you have with the utilities' actions?
Well, this isn't strictly targeted at utilities. We are working to stop both monopoly utilities like DTE and consumers, as well as government contractors who have contracts greater than $250,000.
Like Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yes, and other insurance companies, and lots of other big corporations from being able to continue to buy government services instead of improving the services they're supposed to provide for the people.
Okay, but I think to the question that you were just asked is, it's axiomatic that campaign money is like water, that you block it somewhere, it will still find a path. How do you deal with blocking that path?
Well, we are working through language right now, and in the coming weeks, we're really excited to share our final language with both the State Bureau of Elections as well as the people. And we're working to block the pathways that we legally can. And there's precedent for this at both the federal level and in other states. Michigan is constantly ranked near the bottom of the country as far as government ethics and transparency. And from what we've heard across the state, people are fed up. Both, folks who voted for Donald Trump, folks who voted for Kamala Harris, a lot of folks who didn't vote are fed up with our government being bought by these big corporations, and this is what we can do to stop it. We worked the legislative angle for 2 years. We got nowhere during a Democratic trifecta. We haven't gotten anywhere this term either. And so we're taking this straight to the people to let the people decide whether or not these companies should be able to continue to buy influence.
So Joe Tate has a 501c4 dark money account. If you asked him if he controlled that account, he'd probably say no. Same goes for Consumers Energy and DTE in their own 501c4 dark money accounts. How do you get over that legal hurdle? How do you provide that, separate that degree of affiliation?
Well, we are, again, working out our final language, and we are excited to share that as soon as it's ready. But when, take DTE, for instance, when their C4 has their lobbyist as, I think, the president of the board, and several of their corporate board members are on the board of the C4, you're kind of looking at the same organization. They can say it's not controlled, sure.
Well, let's talk practical politics. Would you agree that if this was a single issue on the ballot in November 2026, its chances of passing would be higher than if it's on the ballot with 6 other issues?
Well, I know in 2012 we saw a vote no on everything campaign that was very effective.
And they could do it again.
And we're in a way different political moment today, I think, than we were in 2012. Now, with the massive changes we're seeing at the federal level, the inaction we're seeing from a lot of folks at the state level, a lot of folks have had enough, and we're hearing that again from people across the state, regardless of party affiliation. And I think, it's telling that the only 2 lawmakers who have spoken out about this as a ballot initiative from the beginning are Representative Dylan Wigela, the Democratic Socialist, and also Representative Jim DeSanta from, I believe, the Freedom Caucus. Far left and the far right, and I'm hopeful that we're going to get regular people across the state to get this done.
You talked about how long you've been working on this, and I'm just wondering, from at least your perception, did term limits help your cause, hurt your cause, or was it irrelevant?
I don't really. So the changes in the term limit law that we had recently, I think, will be helpful in the long-term institution of the legislature. I think the fact that they kind of skirted around the transparency requirements that were supposed to be in there, that wound up being, these transparency reporting requirements that don't require dollar amounts or sources in some cases, is kind of a joke. It's not really what the people were asking for at the ballot. But however, I don't think that that's going to have a bearing on this one way or the other.
Well, but by the same token, this is an initiative that the lawmakers would have a chance to do, and they could do the same thing to you.
Well, they couldn't adopt an amend, luckily, thanks to the recent Michigan Supreme Court ruling. If they want to adopt our policy exactly as is, great, have at it.
The chances of that are?
Slim to none, and I think, as you said earlier, Tim, Slim just walked out the door.
All right, so let's talk, how are you going to gather names? You're not going to pay for them.
No. We're going to do this the grassroots way. We have wonderful organizations across the state who are part of our coalition, and we're already training volunteers. Folks who are interested can go to mopupmichigan.org and sign up to volunteer with the campaign, and they'll be trained on how to collect signatures. And we're going to go everywhere we can across the state talking to the regular folks and get signatures, the old-fashioned way, by building a coalition.
I want to go back to your earlier point. I've heard from government transparency advocates all the time. Michigan is one of the worst, one of the worst in the country, one of the worst in the country. Are any other states doing what you're proposing or something similar to it? And are there any tangible ways that this policy would bring us up in that ranking?
Yeah. So first of all, one of the things that's included within the policy that we're pushing is bringing our C4 issue ad loophole up to federal standards. And that's actually going to do a lot around transparency, because right now, if a 501c4 organization is running what's essentially a political ad, as long as they don't say magic words like vote for or against X candidate, that's not something that has to be reported. And so we're working to make it so that if it's an obvious electioneering communication, that has to be reported as an election expenditure, which would increase us, probably increase our ratings on transparency. With banning the money, that's going to, I think, do wonders towards actually making a government that's accountable to the people, because right now, too many lawmakers are accountable to their big donors who pay for their campaigns and not to the constituents who they've been elected to represent.
But are any other states doing something similar?
Other states have similar laws on the books. Delaware does, Connecticut does, Hawaii does. I believe there's 7 states total with similar policies. The federal government actually has a policy against contractor expenditures in elections. So none of this is unprecedented.
I want to clarify that point. Beyond Michigan's utilities, you want to have a state reporting requirement for all 501c4 electioneering ads that are broadcast in the state?
Yes.
Okay. So
during the election period, yes.
Gotcha. And is that just recently, like within 90 days of an election?
I'm not sure that we have the exact number worked out yet, but it's going to be something similar to that.
Do you expect the other side to take you to court first to challenge the language to keep you off the ballot, and you smiled?
Well, I think, for instance, if we go back to 2018 with the Voters Not Politicians ballot initiative to change our redistricting system, we saw that get taken to court with some pretty spurious claims. And the whole reason groups do that, is because it's cheaper to try even a long shot court case than it is to fight something at the ballot.
So you expect that to happen?
I wouldn't be surprised.
And what are the chances, if this gets on the ballot, that it passes? Do you have internal data that says this is just off the charts?
Yes, this is one of the most popular issues I've seen in the Michigan public.
What's the percentage?
86.
86%?
After message, so 79% before messaging, 86 after.
You don't have anything to do then.
Does that data include negative messaging?
Yes.
Or just what's the strongest negative message that you'd be looking out for?
It's what you said, money's like water, they'll find a way, but the people have a right to try to block that.
Thank you, sir, for showing up.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep us posted, okay?
I sure will. I'll bring signatures over.
Well, don't bring them here, okay? Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you with more Off the Record next week. Bye-bye.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.